With that same spirit of collaboration, we have stood together on the issues of reproductive rights, because rollbacks of Roe versus Wade will not be recognized here in New York State. We are a strong pro-choice state, and we want to keep it that way. The legislation we advanced for reproductive health rights in New York will ensure anti-choice states aren't targeting individuals who come to our state to exercise their right to choose. We also passed legislation that would protect those medical health providers that would help perform the services that folks need in reproductive choice. So those are two of the highlighted items that we're here to talk about, and I'm going to shift it over to Senator Samra Brooke to give us more details. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, who knows. You know, I was reflecting on the fact that we were standing here just about a year ago, and the delegation was united, and we were talking about all of the things that we were so proud to have accomplished, many of us in our first term, but certainly the first time as a united Democratic delegation. And we're proud again of so many of the things that we've accomplished, funding that we have brought into our communities, policies that will help our Western New York community. But the sad truth is that we were also faced with a backdrop of mass shootings, of violence, and of the potential rollback of long hard fought for reproductive rights. And so we knew that there was something we needed to do even in the last couple of weeks of the legislative session. And so that's why we're here today, as Assemblymember Bronson described, but also to remind folks that we realize New York State is the last barrier between many of these rollbacks, many of the failures to act on the federal government's part. We need to protect folks here in New York State. We cannot tolerate another racist mass shooting. We needed to look at what happened in that incident and make sure that we did everything possible to prevent it happening again. When it comes to reproductive rights, I'm a woman who enjoys her right to choose, who enjoys the right of bodily autonomy, and we're going to continue to fight to make sure that those rights are protected. So I want to make sure everyone understands. Here in New York State, we watch closely what happens at a federal level. We watch closely what happens with our Supreme Court. And we're going to continue to work to not just be a progressive beacon so that other states can follow, so that perhaps the federal government can imagine what's possible by seeing what New York State can do, but to also make sure that people understand when you are in New York State, whether you come from another state or whether you are a New York resident, you will be protected, your rights will be protected. Thank you. And I will hand it over to Senator Jeremy Cooney.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me start by saying that I'm very proud to stand not only with the incredible women as part of our Rochester majority delegation, but women across New York State in support of a safe and legal abortion being available to all New Yorkers and all Americans. But I'm going to concentrate my remarks around some of the gun violence legislation that came to the Senate floor and the Assembly floor just last week. We often hear when we talk about gun violence or gun control or gun safety, we get emotional and we get seized up. Some of us are looking for bolder action. Some of us are looking to roll things back. But that's not what we as a majority delegation are looking towards. What we're looking towards is the safety of our families, the safety of our community, the safety of our streets. We hear four words time after time after time, and those four words are, "This can't happen again." Yet we find ourselves saying those same four words week after week if we see these mass shootings take place. How many more times is it going to take for us to actually follow up those words with action? Now we know that we're not alone in this work, that we have to work with our partners at the federal level to enact broad changes so that the illegal guns that are ending up on the streets of Rochester stop. We know that these iron pipelines are coming in from Ohio and Pennsylvania and Georgia. We can support that work. But what we can also do is stand up for New York families. And that's what we did this past week. And we did that in a very meaningful way. We modernized our laws, whether as Senator Brooke talked about the red flag law or extreme risk protection order, making sure that we're closing loopholes within our existing state framework of laws, or whether we're recognizing the role that social media has in the promotion of these threats of violence or mass shootings, and giving New Yorkers the tools necessary to report individuals who will create a danger for themselves or for others. We also recognize the tough issue at hand, which is it's not always about the individual, but the ability of that individual to carry out their plan. And so we took that tough decision, and I think some of us want more, some of us may want a little bit less, but we did pass a law that would restrict access to certain semi-automatic weapons for individuals below the age of 21. And this is something that we know can start, hopefully, a trend not only across our nation, but some action in our federal Congress to recognize that leadership starts with the communities that we represent. And we're hearing loud and clear from the community here in Rochester that parents and grandparents want action. And we're not just about talk, we're about walking the walk, and that's what we did this past week in Albany. So I'm very proud to be part of this majority delegation that continues to listen first to the community and then respond with meaningful action on serious issues such as reproductive justice and gun safety. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Assemblywoman Jen Lunsford.
Thank you very much. We know that banning abortion doesn't stop abortion, it just makes abortions less safe. And that's why here in New York, we codified the rights in Roe v. Wade several years ago in the Reproductive Health Act. And now we're doing more to ensure that everyone all across our country knows that New York will be a safe place for them. Because ensuring that everyone can make healthcare choices that they need to make for themselves and for their families is an essential component of our New York values. I'm proud to stand with my colleagues here in the majority to protect providers and to protect those seeking care. We took a number of steps this year to broaden our legal protections to make sure that providers felt like this was a place they could come to practice medicine. And that's something that we do in many areas of healthcare in New York. When it comes to the issue of guns, it's a very challenging issue for us to deal with. But I'm proud to stand with my colleagues, particularly Assemblymember Meeks, who had a fantastic bill that doesn't just deal with gun violence, it deals with the environment that's radicalizing our youth, that is creating an environment of extremism that is leading to the violence that we're seeing. So again, I'm proud to join my colleagues to be a part of this Democratic majority that is doing the hard work to keep our families safe. And I'm going to hand this over to my colleague, Assemblymember Sarah Clark.
Thank you so much, and it gets harder and harder, obviously, as we go down the chain to keep saying new things, but I will try because we all did work very hard to be supportive. You know, the end of session, post-budget, is always exhausting and tends to run late and go through the night, but then when you add on recent events that we couldn't leave without at least responding to as a start, it made, at least in the Assembly side, an extra 21-hour day marathon added to our last week, which was exhausting but very much needed as we got through what we needed to get through. So, you know, when it comes to gun violence, I read something, we talk a lot about mental health, and mental health is obviously related here and something that we really need to understand. And there were a couple bills that will touch that in some ways, how probably mental health issues are used by hate groups to sort of radicalize folks, how social media plays a role here. But I saw something really interesting from a therapist who said, we can't be clairvoyant. So even if we're seeing somebody who's struggling with some mental health challenges, it doesn't mean we know whether they're going to be a danger to themselves or others all the time. Which is why, as a mom of a 17-year-old, keeping ARs out of the hands of what I call sort of the post-teen years, those young adolescent years from 18 to 21 is a good idea. Therapists are not clairvoyant. We need to make sure that we're giving time. Oh my God! I didn't even touch it.
I started it. I unseated the whole thing.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
It was bound to happen to
I
one.
don't even know where I was in my speech. I was on a roll.
It'll bomb. Clairvoyant.
Bomb, clairvoyant, 17-year-old. You're funny. But I also want to mention a bill that's not on the list of 10 that I debated at 2:30 in the morning on Friday, and that's to strengthen our orders of protection laws for domestic violence victims. Currently, when you go and ask for an order of protection, judges are not required to A, ask if there are guns present in the home, and B, if they do realize that guns are present, if you refuse to surrender them, they do not have to seize them. Those two laws were changed. You will now be required to seize guns when people refuse to submit them on their own, and both the plaintiff and the defendant need to be asked if there's guns present in the home. We need to keep domestic violence victims safe. We know that that first 24, 48-hour period of an order of protection is the most dangerous for those filing it. So I was very proud to fight for the passage of that to join my colleague, Senator Mayer, in the Senate. So that will also be sort of a broader piece of how we're fixing already existing laws, tightening them to protect more people. And when it comes to the right to choose, there's just no way that we can't continue to make sure our state is a safe harbor, a safe haven for not only every New Yorker, but those who are going to possibly be restricted from making their own choices in other states. We have to protect our providers, our clinics, and everything that we can to make sure women always have the right to choose, and our LGBTQ community also has all the healthcare needs met whenever possible. So I'm just really proud to be part of this great team and excited to be fighting for the passage of such great bills. So thank you very much, and now I hand it over to my colleague.
Move these a little. Yeah, it is, right? Right. Okay, I think that's good. So I want to go on record and say to Big Brother Harry Bronson, as it relates to us all being neophytes, that hazing was officially banned in 1985 on all college campuses. For those of us who were in the assembly, you may be able to relate to what I'm talking about. but we made it through. So I'm Assemblyman Damon Meeks, representing the 137th Assembly District. And I just want to say thank you all for being here today, and thank you all to my colleagues. And just wanted to just share this with you. Last year, 81 people were murdered in the city of Rochester, marking a more than 60% increase in homicides compared to the year prior. Just this weekend, we lost even more lives to homicides. The tremendous pain that our community has been forced to endure has devastated our families, and with the potential to ripple through future generations. It is our responsibility as representatives of this community to move forward together with meaningful solutions that will put a halt to the horrific rates of violence across our state. While online social media platforms have allowed us to more easily connect with one another, it has also brought together those who are united by hatred and violent extremism. Our state must be equipped with the tools and resources needed to hold these individuals accountable. This includes preventative measures to identify and address threats to our communities before any act of violence can be committed. I am proud to have been able to introduce and pass legislation that will establish the Task Force on Social Media and Violent Extremism. This bill will help us to understand how online platforms have facilitated and promoted hate and domestic terrorism. Despite what our delegation has accomplished this session, there is still work to be done. That is why I have also introduced legislation that requires individuals in New York State to complete a 5-hour gun safety course before being allowed to purchase a weapon or ammunition, a firearm or ammunition. I am committed to having this bill passed next session, and taking the steps necessary to safeguard the lives of the members of our communities across the state of New York. Thank you. At this point, we'll take on-topic questions from the media.
Red flagging ERPOs. And I'm the superintendent last week, and half an hour was concerned if the school districts were left out of that. They're not allowed to file for that. And even if it has to be an individual, it can't be a school on behalf of the school district. And also, it would just be the person that had the register done, not if the son was the one that they were concerned about, the dad could still have the register done in the house.
I can take that. You know, certainly we're trying to be very judicious in expanding red flags because this is a balancing act. We want to make sure if the signals are there, that information is shared, and then we can make sure that individual does not get access to a gun. So what we did this year is we expanded it to be more mental health providers, and we've also required them, if they see it, to then report it and get that into the databases that exist currently. So, you know, we're continuing to evaluate this. Oftentimes in a school setting, it's not just the school, but they have social workers there, they have other counselors, they have access to this. So even though we did not go as far as to directly allow them to make that report, you know, there's a process in place that would allow it. But we'll evaluate this and continue to consider it.
I think it's important to remember that most people with mental health issues don't commit crimes. You know, many people have mental health issues, and we can't treat everyone with a mental health diagnosis like they're a potential criminal. One of the things we did with this expansion of ERPO, the Extreme Risk Protection Orders, was ensure that a healthcare practitioner who had recently examined someone was the person who could make this referral. And I think that if a school has a concern, there should then be a referral to a healthcare practitioner. And perhaps that we can broaden this to school psychologists. Because I want to make sure we are dealing with a civil right. That's the thing that complicates measures around gun violence prevention, is people have a civil right, and we need to ensure that we are not unduly burdening that right. But I think that that's certainly a conversation we can have about ways to better funnel school concerns through a healthcare setting.
Yeah, I think we know that there's threats. There's been threats for some time, and I think us moving forward in this manner, we give the power to the Attorney General's office here in the state of New York. And I think as a state, we're known for being proactive when issues come afloat, whether it's national or locally. So with that being said, I think we have to be intentional in protecting New Yorkers and leading the way in doing so. It didn't take another incident to feel justified. Just look at the history and the challenges that we've been plagued with for too long. It's needed. Thank you.
Any other questions on topic?
Maybe comment on the, I know the firebombing, anybody the firebombing about the center there this morning?
Sure. I mean, obviously, we all agree that there's no room for violence anywhere. When it comes to our crisis pregnancy centers, I think many of us, if not all of us, have our concerns, and therefore, you know, the state legislature did pass a comprehensive study for the next year to figure out how they're fitting into women's health and reproductive health, and are they above the board with what they need to be doing. But that's a study for another day. Right now, we would all agree that there's no room for violence, and that we hope there's a thorough investigation. We understand who's doing this, they're held accountable and responsible, and that if there's needs for security, obviously that they're addressed.
Just to follow up to that, are there any pro-life clinics that are eligible for
So in terms of the pot of money that the governor has set aside, that would be for clinics that offer abortion services. That's where they think the growth and capacity will be needed if Roe v. Wade is overturned.
Do you feel like security should be added up for these pro-life clinics?
First of all, anti-choice clinics, I think that they, again, in this particular instance, if there's needs for security at certain places because of an uptick, then obviously that's something we need to address. But this was not in response to security threats. Obviously for our crisis pregnancy centers, it's in response to Roe v. Wade being overturned and what that will look like for our abortion providers in the state.
I'd like to add this point. One of the problems we have with violence in the city of Rochester and in many cities across the state, the first is access to guns. The second is an inability for so many of our young people to be able to resolve conflicts in a different way. So this incident where violence is being used against a clinic that has a position regarding reproductive choice that you disagree with is totally inappropriate. And vice versa. A clinic that performs abortion, if violence were to be used against those individuals or that clinic, it is wrong. And as adults, we should not be sending a message to our young people that you address differences through the use of violence. And so, for me, I think our job as policymakers is to help promote the idea that there are alternatives to conflict resolution, there are alternatives to disputes that you might have, and it does not have to resort to violence. Being able to have dialogue and conversation, being able to be respectful of people you disagree with or respectful of people who look differently than you do is core to our society. And that part is much bigger than legislation. That part is what we have to do as a community, is to get that message out. Enough is enough with the violence. Whether it's violence in our neighborhoods or whether it's violence against clinics that you disagree with. Enough. Anything else?
Yes, in terms of any anticipated legal challenges that may come up, the timeline for these bills getting integrated and for everything to take effect, anyone comment on anticipated legal challenges that may come up in court as a result of this passage?
Lawyers. I anticipate legal challenges to almost everything we passed because it's the kind of thing you bring legal challenges to. Whether I think those legal challenges have merit is a much deeper conversation. So much of this, particularly when you're dealing with Second Amendment jurisprudence, depends on the court system you're in. You can see wildly divergent opinions between the Ninth Circuit and the Second Circuit. So I'm not going to comment on where I think those cases will go, but you're passing laws that relate to the Constitution, someone's going to bring a suit for something.
For this package too, is there a timeline, maybe go out for each separate bill and when it's going to take effect?
I believe each had, what?
Each had a different.
Yeah, the governor, I believe she signed the entire package. The entire package has been signed, but there were effective dates that changed based on the bill. And there were, in that particular package, there were 10 bills, so that's all over the place.
One of the areas of the legal challenges that we have to really monitor closely, and that is under the reproductive choice, where we are offering protection for folks who are performing medical services for residents in other states that have those medical services as unlawful. I really believe that's going to be challenged, and we're going to see, and that's important because in the area of LGBTQ rights, and in particular trans rights, I've just introduced a bill that would do similar protections for medical providers if someone is coming to have transition services, medical services provided here in New York State. But I expect that there's going to be litigation in that area, and we're going to have to monitor that closely to see where the courts come down. Off-topic questions as a group, or you want to pull us aside?
I got a simple one, and if we're all talking about gas prices, the gas, yeah, it went back up and it continues to go up. I mean, anything else? I know we've asked it 1,000 times, but
I'll say similar to the rent, the gas is too damn high.
So following a guy who drives this huge pickup truck, don't even want to guess, 8 miles a gallon maybe. Look, we have put a moratorium on the sales tax at the pump because our families needed it. You know, and we've authorized counties to opt in. I understand Monroe County, if they haven't, they were planning on opting in. So it's a small piece of relief. We have control over those tax dollars, and our families need the relief today. Gas prices are too darn high, you know, but so is go to the grocery store. You know, the inflation is hitting our families really hard. So, you know, it was important for us to do that, and we have, and you know, we'll monitor it. It ends at the end of this year, so we'll monitor and see if there's a further step that we have to take. Okay.
Follow up to that, so Dan actually different questions. Since you're just going to be the tax policy center, they say a targeted approach that provides assistance to low-income workers would have been more effective than the gas tax holiday for everyone.
Every family is impacted by the high gas prices at the pump, and we wanted to help every single family. As far as low income, we have done other things in the budget, and I know we have a couple of champions here that can talk to some of the tax credits that we did in the budget. So this is looking in a comprehensive way on how we can help all of our families that are impacted by the economy, and in this case, an economy with inflation. So we wanted to help every family in New York, and I'll let a couple of my colleagues talk about the other things that we are doing to help families that are lower income.
So this is obviously a problem, but we see gas taxes are high across the country. They're high in other countries. This is not a New York specific problem, and we only have so much control. So what we've done, as my colleague said, is put money back into people's pockets through different means. We increased the earned income tax credit, which directly addresses the low income population. We increased the child tax credit, which was shown federally when we did that to be one of the greatest means of pulling people out of poverty. For more of our homeowner and middle class families, we have a property tax credit, and we've accelerated the middle class tax credit so that we have the lowest effective tax rate for middle class taxpayers in 70 years. What we've done is trying to find other ways that we as a state have control over what comes out of people's pockets to try to offset some of that inflation, both at the pump and in grocery stores.
Let me just say, as a plug, this is the reason why we need to invest in infrastructure around electric vehicles so that we can make a transition when we're ready as a community, as a society, as a state, to move to more hybrid or electric vehicles across the state of New York. You know, I just got back from a concert downstate, and yes, I paid a lot of money in gas, but I also saw along the thruway trip back all these new thruway stops being built. And we're going to see a lot of families traveling this summer, hopefully safely. And I hope that all of these thruway stops, and I hope as we build more municipal infrastructure here in the city of Rochester, that we include EV charging to make sure that as we move towards our CLCPA or climate goals as a state, we do that with a mind towards electric vehicles. We're doing that already with school buses, thanks to some of the champions here, with our school districts, but that's the way that we're going to change the conversation from the fluctuating price of petroleum and gas if we actually use the technology that we have within our grasp today.
All right, thank you all very much. Appreciate your time today.
See you.
Something to eat.